What is up, guys? Welcome back to episode 6 of the 5 Seconds of Courage podcast. We got a fun episode today, and we also got a little bit more energy than last week.
Definitely.
We got a full 8 hours of snoozes. We're feeling good. We're feeling excited. And we also got some big news that we'll share at the end. If you make it to the end of the episode, we got some big news. If you're watching, you might already see it. But if you're listening, we'll share it towards the end. But today we're going to kind of talk about how failure can oftentimes stunt our courage. When things don't always go as planned, it makes us kind of take a step back and be like, all right, I don't want to try that again. Because failure never feels good in the moment.
Yeah.
And so I think failure and fear correlate a lot. And we'll kind of dig into that throughout the episode. But that's kind of the topic today, right? When let's say you raise your hand in class and you speak up, or you're in a meeting and you kind of build up the courage to say something in the meeting, and people don't like it, or it doesn't go as planned, and it's maybe wrong, like your answer's wrong, it makes you real hesitant to do it again. And that's kind of the part of failure stunting courageous decisions.
We'd come up with a little concept, if you want to share it, about just kind of a visualization of what it looks like for people.
Yeah.
Just to kind of understand what we're talking about, and then we're going to obviously get more in depth, because this is kind of a very small example, but the concept is there.
Yeah, I know. I think just kind of like what I was a little bit touching on, but when I was in school, or you raise your hand, and you're like, oh, I know the answer to this, and then you answer it, and the teacher's like, usually the teacher's pretty nice about it. It's like, no, that's not really where I was going with it, or kind of like that. You just like, your heart stops, and you're like, oh, that is so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like, everyone in my class thinks I'm a fool now, you know? And so the rest of the class, no way I'm going to raise my hand again. Like, I wouldn't, even if I knew the answer, I'm not going to risk it. And so that's kind of what we're going to unpack. And maybe it's on a bigger scale. Maybe you have an example of something like that in school, or even something previously. Let's say you're older, you got a career, you kind of have a concept like that you came to mind as we talked about failure stunting courage. But I know you got an example, buddy?
Yeah, so I got an example of how I kind of overcame that cycle of like, okay, well, you fail, or you lose, or you do something wrong, and then instead of continue to try again, it's like, okay, well, let's keep trying.
Yeah.
And so when I was in high school, even middle school, I played soccer, and we just kept losing. And like late on, like we would do really well during the regular season, do well at the beginning of the playoffs, and then like lose the semifinal or lose the state championship. And it was just like, man, that happened. My 8th grade year, we lost semifinal. Same in 9th grade, 10th and 11th, we lost to state. So it was just like over and over, we just kept losing the state final. And with club, if you know much about soccer, there's high school and there's club. And then in club, it was like we would go to state cup, or we would go to like a tournament, and the same thing would happen. It'd be like, we'd do great in the tournament, we'd go undefeated, and then go to the final game and the championship, and then we'd lose and get second place. So it was like I just kept coming in second, third, fourth place.
Yeah.
And it was just up until my senior year, I was like, man, like it just kind of kept feeling like this. And senior year, we had lost some guys. Previously, we'd started our first or second game, we lost like 10-0. Like, we just got blown out. We just weren't ready, and which was unlike us. Like, I don't think we'd ever lost it. Like, my team, like Oak Brook, we had never lost a game like that. And so, just this losing. And, like, we won a good bit during there, but it was losing the big games.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
And so, eventually, came senior year, and we were just like, yo, we're not doing this again. Like, you know, a lot of people could just be like, well, we could, like, kind of get in this role of, like, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of shrivel up and not really work super hard in this case, or in other cases it's, well, I'm not going to raise my hand again, or it's like I'm not going to pursue that again because I failed once. But in this, we're like, we're going full steam this year, and ended up, we started off like losing that first game pretty bad, but then we started doing well, went into playoffs, won the first 3 rounds, and then ended up winning a state championship. And I don't say that to really exemplify the state championship, but I really say that to look back at losing. And I and multiple guys on the team, 2 of my really close friends in high school, Justin and Isaiah, can say the same thing. We are better because of those failures.
Yeah.
And we were a better team because of those failures.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was terrible. I hated losing. Like,
Yeah.
It was no fun losing a state championship. When you won, I think it was my sophomore year, we had won every game except our first or second game. We lost like 3-2. and then won like 21 straight or something like that, which was just crazy. And then we got to the state championship and lost again. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And so that's another thing we're going to kind of move into is also like how to overcome this and also how to let failure shape you and not hurt you.
Yeah. I have a question. While you were kind of in that time, you were losing a lot, maybe sophomore, junior year of high school, what was kind of the mindset? Like you kept losing, failure. Were there some guys on your team that were just like, that ain't it, Chief. Like, I don't want to come back. Like, if we're just going to keep losing, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, we had multiple guys quit the team. I don't know if it was for that reason, but it probably weighed in. We were a great program. We had been for years, just with the coaching staff and the players who had come through Oak Brook. And so it was a great program. So I don't know if that's why people left or anything, but yeah, you saw a lot of times people's head hang. Like, I remember one time before one state championship, one of the guys was like, this is probably our last chance. And that was like my sophomore year. And so he's like, this is probably our last chance because we were losing like 8 seniors or something.
Yeah.
And then the next year we went back and the next year. So it was like a lot of guys had that mentality of like, and even myself at some points. I'm not going to say I was perfect and just thinking, all optimistic, let's go win this. A lot of times I was like, man, after that first 10-0 game, I was like, dang it, my senior year is going to be rough with soccer. We just lost 10-0. And so it was really not settling into that kind of fear of like, well, I can just keep losing, or like I'm just going to be scared of the opposition in this. It's actually like, let's rise above, let's get better, and whatever way it is, it can be smarter, better soccer, more, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, well, I think what I like about that too is just like finding in that story there's a big correlation between the failure, the fear of failure, and just the continued fear of like, I don't like this, like I don't want to keep doing it. I know, like, for me, when I fail, it sucks, like, great, now everyone thinks I'm a failure. Mm-hmm. It's like when you lose those state championships, it's like, oh, great, now everyone thinks, like, oh, they can't finish, they can't. And I'm sure, like, there's an element of fear in that. You don't want people to think that of you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of another side of it, too, is what other people think of you. But I think the fear of failure is what makes failure so scary.
Yeah.
And so if we can kind of be like, hey, I recognize that there's fear here, but despite the failure, despite continued failure, which is the worst kind, when you just failure, there's no like anything to hold on to, anything to kind of give you a little bit of hope, that's when the courage comes in. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm afraid. I do not want to continue to fail. But taking the courageous decision to be like, all right, boys, kind of a mentality shift. All right, boys, this is our year. Like, I know we keep failing, but going forward, this is what we want to do. And I think another part of it, too, and I want to ask you this, buddy, is do you think it takes courage or not, or what are your views on viewing failure in a way that you're not or viewing failure in a way that you're not afraid of it?
Yeah, I think that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
To be able to go after something that you've already failed at. So it's like, okay, well, I've already failed at this once. That in alone stops a lot of people from making a courageous decision, is that they've already failed once or twice or multiple times. It's like, well, I don't want to fail again, like you were saying. I don't want to, fall on my face one more time in front of a bunch of people. I don't want to lose again. I don't want to make a fool of myself. It's like, I don't want to do that. No one wants to. But it's going in with that mindset of like, okay, well, there is that fear that I could be afraid of, but I'm not going to let that stop from making this courageous decision or this really cool, action that I can go do or something like that. So I think they correlate very strongly of having, well, you can fear something, that you've already failed, and then that dictating whether you do it or not again. Mm-hmm. And then even further on is like, okay, well, there's a courageous route, or there's like, I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, because in my mind it's a little tricky, because the first episode we talked about courage being something where you make a decision despite being afraid. Mm-hmm. You can't make a courageous decision without the element of fear. But then if we're like, hey, failure is a learning opportunity. The most successful people I know, they love failure. Yeah. Because they have seen in their life or are able to recognize that they learn way more in failure than they do than if it were to all go perfectly.
I mean, look at anyone who has really succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in any realm, sports, business, their
Life.
faith, anything. Like, I mean, even in the Bible, it talks about how Paul failed. I mean, obviously, he never became perfect or anything, but he lived a life total opposite of what he died as, you know? And it's like, that happens even now with, like, famous people who own Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
Of, like, well, they probably failed a bunch. They probably came up, inventors, like,
Thomas Edison.
and Albert Einstein. I bet they came up with a bunch of things that never passed regulations or never did any, never went anywhere. But then the huge things that ended up blowing them up was because they failed so much that they learned from that. And so that's kind of going into the learning side of failure, if that's what you were moving into.
And that's like, I feel like it's so cliche, right?
Yeah.
It's like, enjoy failure, like, you learn so much from failure, it's an opportunity, fail forward. Like, you always see that stuff on your Instagram Explore page.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I honestly think, like, in terms of being courageous and living boldly, if you want to live a bold life, one where you make courageous decisions because you recognize the benefit of making a courageous decision and how it can recreate your life going forward and recreate the lives of those around you going forward, then why obey to fear? Why be like, all right, I failed, like, that's it for me, I'm too scared to continue to try. I think that is the biggest part, right? Is recognizing failure is, you don't have to fear failure. And so that's kind of tying back to my initial question with, you have to be afraid in order to make a courageous decision. Is if you are able to do what we're saying and be like, all right, I actually enjoy failure because I recognize I learn from it, and you're not afraid of it, then is failure an opportunity for a courageous decision if you're not afraid of it? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And some people might disagree with us.
True.
I don't even know what I think.
Yeah, it's just and honestly, you might not even need to have a, like, okay, well, I believe this or I believe this. It's really about acting. It's like, well, I'm going to act this way or this way.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think either way is wrong, you know? Of like, okay, well, there's a courageous decision to be made and I am fearing failure. Let me do that. Or am I loving failure and still making that courageous decision? I think the courageous decision in that instance of when I choose, so let's put it two ways. Let's go with one way first. There's failure. I am now fearing failure. And I have the opportunity to fail again in the same way I just did. I'm going to be courageous and not fear failure and do it. Whatever it could be. Raising your hand. Let's go back to that concept to just mirror it. So with that one, it's like, okay, I raised my hand, answered wrong. I thought it was like 38. It was really 42. The second time, raise my hand. Well, I'm fearing failure. I'm being courageous because I'm raising my hand again. Now let's do the other way. Same concept. I failed. Raised my hand. 42. It was 38. Whatever. And then I have the opportunity to, the teacher asking another question. This time, I'm making the courageous decision to not fear failure and to raise my hand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So either way is not really wrong or right. I think obviously it's very situational.
Yeah.
But I think there's just a shift of where you actually are being courageous. Is it in the moment of like, okay, well, I'm going to be courageous while fearing failure? Or am I going to not feel failure? Oh, that was it. I'm going to not fear failure and be courageous in that by loving failure.
Yeah, it made me think of a story. I was listening to a guy named Simon Sinek this week. He's a very popular speaker.
What does he speak on?
He speaks on leadership.
Okay, cool.
A lot of business stuff too, managers and stuff. And he was talking about how he was consulting a company and he was sitting at the board table with all these big name executives. And of course they had a lot of power, a lot of money, right? And they hired an ad agency to come in and pitch them this campaign, and the guy was going through all these analytics and all this data and all this stuff, and Simon Sinek was sitting there, and he was like, all this stuff went right over my head. I knew nothing, and so as he's there to consult this company and help them make better decisions, he was like, I just started asking questions like, hey, I'm sorry to stop you, but what does this mean here? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And the guy that was giving the speech, pitching the campaign, started to get a little annoyed with him. He's like, come on, like, you're the consultant, bro. Like, come on, you're not really a part of this. And he was just like, kept asking questions. He was like, I'm okay being the idiot in the room because by the end of the meeting, I learned so much. And I just thought about that. And he was saying, throughout the meeting, so all these other big name executives were like, yeah, I didn't really understand that either. So, like, I think Simon Sinek making the courageous decision to be like, hey, I don't know, like, what this means.
Yeah.
Recognizing a little bit of that failure aspect, like doesn't really know it. And I don't know if that's a failure or not, but kind of tying it to this. The courageous decision to do that and be like, hey, I don't recognize it. Again, he doesn't know the next thing. Hey, I don't know what that is either. The next thing. I still don't know what this is. And how that impacted the people around him in the room to have the courage to be like, yeah, I don't either. And so I think that's the cool part of it too, is one, you benefit from it, and the people around you benefit from it, to continue trudging on after failure hits you in the face. You're like, that's okay. I'll keep going.
Yeah, I think he almost hit really well on the second when I was sharing the 2 ways the other day. I think he hit really well on the second. He loved failure.
Yeah.
Or he loved what other people said failure would be, or what the speaker said failure. Well, he redefined failure in his own mind.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not failure. That's me succeeding.
Yeah.
And so in those moments, it's like, okay, well, am I actually failing, or if I can get something out of it, I'm going to succeed. In the same way, it kind of goes back to a biblical principle of consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face suffering. It's like, well, when I face suffering, I'm actually not taking that as a failure or as a hardship. It's like I'm actually considering that joy. Mm-hmm. And it's like that's where we can redefine what failure means or what suffering means in our own heart and our own mind, is when we face these things like Simon was doing. He was facing that. Well, he considered it joy to do that, you know? And that's the world considered that suffering. Yeah. But he considered that joy, and ultimately he succeeded because of that. And like we were talking about last week, he impacted a lot of others because of that courageous decision.
Yeah, and the continued courageous decisions.
Yeah, over and over.
Over and over again, just like, I don't know what that means either.
Yeah.
I think this is really cool. This topic, I wasn't quite sure which route we were going to go with it, but I thought this is really cool. Before you guys log off, before you guys leave or click off the video, we do want to share.
Before that, I got one more thing.
Say one more
We
thing.
do want to get there, but I want to start doing this thing, and me and Joseph really didn't talk about this, but knowing Joseph, he'll love this. We're going to start having guests on here.
Yes.
We don't know exactly when or who, but I think we're going to talk to the guests and have them challenge the listeners with just something to do throughout that next week or to kind of live by. Whatever they talked about that day. If we have someone in and they talk about, I don't know, whatever. They'll say, give a little challenge based off what they talked about to the viewers and to us. I think that'd be really cool for us to stay accountable too. So I think we want to start doing that now.
So what's the challenge for this week?
So the challenge is, as you go about this week or just obviously your life, start recognizing what normal people call failure, or what society and culture has started defining failure as. And if it's something that truly is failure, and is truly not going to benefit you, accept that. But then there's those other things where people are calling it failure, but it's really succeeding if you switch perspective. So I think a challenge this week is if you find those moments, like Simon did in that episode, or in that instance, or different things, switch your perspective to like, okay, well, I can actually consider this joy, or I can actually learn from this, and I can actually see this as a success where culture's telling me it's a failure.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to do that in our lives, and we'll share that, or do that this week in our personal lives, and we'll share that next week as a little thing. And we would love to, if something comes up, shoot us a DM or something and let us know. But now,
Well, I love that. Recognize where failure has caused you to stop being courageous in your life, and look that right in the eye and be like, screw you, I'm going to make a courageous decision. And whether you share that with us, which please do, we would love those stories, and we'll kind of come up with stuff and share that with you on our Instagram. If you haven't followed our Instagram, it's at 5sec of courage. And if you also go to our Instagram, we have a link with all our links to the YouTube videos. You can listen to on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But there's another one to our website. And if you go to our website, you can order this merch. We got these hoodies. We got some tanks. We got some T-shirts. I'm wearing the white font T-shirt underneath. We got T-shirts with the logo on it.
We got other stuff. We got stickers, tumblers. Joseph's put a lot of time. I have not really done a ton with the merch, but Joseph's put a lot of time and effort into this, and a little bit of upfront costs. So we are really hoping that it kind of just hits. And because for us to, like the bracelets were a small thing, now we get to represent this. So it's less about, okay, here's merch. It's more like go wear our product to encourage others and to encourage yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think that is truly another way to just market our brand, but also market our values.
Yeah. I think we want to talk about this in another episode, but encourage versus discourage.
Yeah.
Encourage is to give or fulfill or like speak courage into someone. And so you can encourage someone simply by wearing this stuff. So go check it out on our website. It'll be super hype. It feels so nice too. Like the insides are like real soft.
Yeah, it's super nice quality too. We ordered some and just wore it, tested it. I think Joseph went and worked out in the tank.
Yeah.
It's like this stuff is quality. We aren't just putting out,
No,
I don't.
Yeah.
So I would wear it. So it's got to be very quality.
True.
Top.
Buddy only wears the bougie stuff.
I mean, look at my DH gate.
Adidas. That's awesome. Cool. Well, guys, thank you for listening to episode 6 of the 5 Seconds of Courage podcast. Go recognize where failure has caused you to stop being courageous this week. And share that with us, whether you DM us or you post on your story and tag us on it or anything like that. We would love to hear it. And not just because we want to hear about how you're making courageous decisions, but because we want your life to benefit from making a courageous decision this week. So we'll see you guys next week. Have a good week.